Receiving some emergency funds to keep fighting wildfires across our state. Earlier this month, we told you the agency sent a letter to lawmakers saying only about $11 million remained in the budget for the rest of the year. Well, yesterday the state responded and granted CAL FIRE another $234 million. This is the 7th time in the last decade CAL FIRE has had to receive extra money, and taxpayer advocates say they're hoping that doesn't become a permanent solution.
النخلة الوحدة صارت $12. زين $12 كيلو الرطب بيش. هي إذا تريد تعطي يعني كم كيلو؟ 3 كيلوات 4 كيلو رطب ب1000 4000. فماكو مردود اقتصادي.
طبعا حالة تبكي مؤلمة، يعني الإنسان يتمنى الأفضل ما يتمنى الأسوأ. احنا صار بلادنا الأسوأ بدل ما أنه نتطور للأحسن.
Death toll is contained in the latest situation overview of floods that have continued to affect more communities in 12 states across Nigeria. The most affected are Niger, Anambra, Delta states, and Kogi, where Benue and Niger rivers meet. So far, more than 800,000 people have been displaced. Most of them have relocated to host communities, while others have sought shelter in neighboring schools. Those numbers are expected to rise as the National Emergency Management Agency put 8 more states on red alert. Nigeria's government has so far provided $8.2 million for emergency intervention. Some of the most critical needs include food, shelter, clean water, mosquito nets, and medicine. The country's Center for Disease Control has warned of potential outbreak of cholera and other waterborne diseases. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Japan is being lashed by another major storm, the second in as many months, in a year that's already seen heat waves, typhoons and landslides. Heavy rain and high winds battered the south of the country on Saturday as Typhoon Trami approached Okinawa, some 1,000 kilometers southwest of Tokyo. Almost 400 flights were cancelled after Kansai International Airport in Osaka closed until Monday. The airport has only just fully reopened after being damaged last month by Typhoon Jebi, the most powerful storm to hit Japan in 25 years.
Hurricane Florence has passed, but the so-called storm of a lifetime is still being felt in the Carolinas. Rivers continue to crest following record-breaking rainfall. In North Carolina, the cleanup is underway, but there are fears of long-term consequences. Toxic coal ash pits are scattered across North and South Carolina. The byproduct of the coal industry contains arsenic, lead and mercury. Activists say storms like Florence make contamination unavoidable.
But they still got to deal with the 6 million tons of poisonous coal ash.
Bobby Jones has long campaigned to tighten laws around the coal industry and says every storm makes things worse.
I'm a Christian, so I just can't sit back and let God's people be treated like this and not say or do anything about it and call myself a Christian.
In poorer communities, there are concerns about the rate of recovery. Many residents couldn't afford to leave when the storm came, but now that aid is here, some are being ignored.
There's not a lot of attention being brought to some of the minorities in the neighborhoods. I think that's one of the problems that I'm hearing is that they're not getting the services that they need, and hopefully the word will get out and that all that will change, but it's a problem.
It's estimated that the cost of Hurricane Florence could reach $50 billion. It's a storm that will long be remembered here and is still lingering. Hurricane Florence may have long since departed, but the threat from the storm remains. In neighbouring South Carolina, rivers are expected to crest, leading to yet more flooding, more evacuations and more suffering. And here, as the waters recede, they're exposing potential environmental problems and a long, slow recovery for the poor. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera, Goldsboro, North Carolina.
The death toll from Friday's earthquake and tsunami on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island has surged to at least 384, with well over 540 people seriously injured. A tsunami triggered by a magnitude 7.5 quake swept over the city of Palu, washing away entire buildings and homes. The local disaster agency says the death toll is expected to rise even further. Following the earthquake were some 100 aftershocks, including one of magnitude 6.7. One South Korean national who was in the region for a paragliding contest has been out of contact since the disaster. The South Korean embassy in the Southeast Asian nation said it's proving difficult to locate the unnamed person's whereabouts due to power outages and down telecommunications in the region.
A large-scale mural turning heads in Lakeview, and you can be there for its official unveiling. This 750-square-foot mural dedicated to Chicago's queer community, and you are invited to that celebration. Head over to the Howard Brown Health Center today at 2:30 this afternoon to check out the official unveiling along with music and food.
This next story might be too graphic for younger or more sensitive viewers. Father James Nowak has faced a multitude of accusations of child sex abuse. In fact, the Joliet Diocese paid out millions of dollars to 8 men who claimed Father Nowak abused them.
When CBS 2 investigator Brad Edwards started looking into why he was being housed next to a school, he moved and moved again. And you won't believe where Brad found him now.
At this extended stay motel, next to the Joliet Diocese Catholic Charities offices.
Father Nowak?
Yes.
I'm Brad from Channel 2.
God bless you, sir.
Can we come in and talk to you?
No, thank you.
That's Father James Nowak.
Did the diocese have you move here?
You can contact them and ask them.
We did contact the diocese. After our requests for information and interviews were denied,
I'm here for Bishop Conlon.
we showed up.
Brad Edwards from Channel 2.
At which time we were lied to by the Joliet Diocese spokesperson Ed Flavin.
So he's leaving for Ireland right now.
That was September 13th, yet we saw the bishop, our Daniel Conlon, 3 days later, still in town, at a mass in Shorewood. The pilgrimage to Ireland started on the 17th. Fully 4 days after.
So he's leaving for Ireland right now.
Huh. We wanted to ask Bishop Conlon in part about Father Nowak. Are they monitoring him? Why, with 8 credible victims, was he being housed here next to a middle school? That's when we started investigating. Then he moved, and moved again, to the hotel, next to the Catholic Charities offices. Here are 2 of Nowak's credible victims. Both were 13 at the time of abuse.
In helping me button my pants, he got on his knees in front of me and put his hand inside my underwear and fondled me.
He asked me if I knew what oral sex was. And I said, no idea. And he said, let me show you. And he took a book out and he showed me.
On Facebook, Nowak recently posted, "Please pray for me. It is a difficult time in my life." Adding, in regard to our beloved Bishop Daniel Conlon, he has cared for me well.
I've never been mad at Father Nowak, which sounds strange, but I've been furious with the bishops and the people in power that have not done the right thing.
I would think after all this time they would learn how to get this right, and they just keep making mistake after mistake after mistake.
Brad Edwards, CBS 2 investigator.
The diocese cited Attorney General Lisa Madigan's inquiry as to why they wouldn't grant Brad an interview. The AG's office said their investigation had no bearing. Other church leaders, like Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Cupich, have done media interviews since Madigan announced that she's looking into the state's 6 dioceses.
Transgender, gender identity, gender dysphoria, those are words we are hearing more these days as the LGBTQ community pushes to promote its lifestyles. Pastor Richard Ellis of Reunion Church in Dallas is here with us now to discuss several issues in the headlines surrounding gender identities these days. So, Pastor, you say you have seen many of your church members struggling with gender identity. Is it a larger problem than most Christians may understand today?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I think it's way more detailed and specific than most people are willing to get into. I think you could throw the Romans 1 verse at anybody and say, Romans chapter 1, that they just kind of going down the drain and homosexuality. But this is way bigger than just that. You have intersex people who, and I've dealt with this personally, a child is born with, are they male, female? You can't really tell by the body parts, and the parents literally have this horrendous decision of saying, okay, which way do we go? And they pick male or female. And I've gone through this entire process with a person who was designated female at birth, but turned out that was not the right choice pretty quick, and had to have, to not get too specific here, but had to have male organ literally built. And these are Christian people. Ended up marrying, having, adopting children. So I would say, we rush to judgment sometimes. Clearly, the Bible speaks clearly about homosexuality, but even the people that come to me from that lifestyle, I try to speak the truth in love to them and find out where they are and go from there.
New York City has a bill out there now that would allow people who don't identify as male or female to check an X on their birth certificate. Is this legitimizing what really is a mental disorder?
Well, the scripture says that God is not the author of confusion, and there's a lot of confusion in the world. And when you take all the boundaries off what kids are seeing on the internet, and then they go try to, do these things or think that's normal, and no one's telling them there's any absolutes, there's no right or wrong. I kissed a girl and I liked it, so some girl does that. Well, certainly going to feel something, but does that mean that's who you are? Then you end up, well, I'm not a male, I'm not a female. What I am, I'm going to put an X. I think it's a fraction of the population. If someone genuinely is in a situation where, if you looked at them biologically, their sex and gender being two separate things for some people, they don't know what to check off. And so you say, well, that's crazy. It's only crazy until it's not your issue. And I think as we engage the world with the gospel that Jesus died on the cross, buried, raised from the dead, we have to see where they are and move to that, and then let the Holy Spirit, once he's inside them, change their heart, change their mind, change their life.
In the United Kingdom, the government there is investigating why there's been a more than 4,000% increase in children seeking to transition to the opposite sex. What's at issue here for children to make this type of decision? Are they even mature enough to understand all the consequences of the action?
Yeah, I would say no. Children are developing, their minds are still developing, they're feeling things, they're angry, they're happy, they're experimenting. And to make such a life-changing, physically changing your body, literally to say I was born female, I'm going to be a male now, or male going to be a female. And I have personally, engaged with these people who have made these decisions. It's very intense, and it is not for a child to be making these decisions.
Pastor, bottom line for us, what does God say about gender identity, and how can we as his people promote that message?
Well, go back to Genesis, and it says he created them male and female, but even Jesus referenced eunuchs, someone, you can be born that way, make a choice to be that way, or, it's in the scripture that people can be born a certain way because it's a fallen world. But my deal is, if someone comes to me and says, for instance, I'm gay, I'm homosexual, I say, they say I was born that way. I say, okay, I'll yield on that. You were born that way. What I'd like to talk to them about is a second birth, where Jesus takes residence in that human being from the inside out, begins to transform them and give them the power, if it's a dysfunction of some kind, to deal with that, if it's a sin, to overcome that. But I think we're way too quick to throw people, they are people, under the bus, instead of speak the truth in love and try to help them get from point A to point B, or point A to point J, which would be Jesus, and see their life change from the inside out.
este puñado de dinosaurios decidieron no darnos la ley. Tenemos una lista de mujeres que han muerto en abortos clandestinos y no hay vidas salvadas, no hay rastros de que hayan salvado ninguna vida, nos seguimos muriendo las mujeres.
Que hay que hacer una consulta popular vinculante como hicieron en Irlanda y sostener la movilización en la calle y avanzar en que se pueda expresar la voluntad de la gente que mayoritariamente en la calle aprobaba el derecho.
Adultery is no longer a crime in India. On September 27th, the nation's highest court ruled the 158-year-old colonial-era law was unconstitutional. The way the law worked was a man who had sex with a married woman without her husband's permission had committed a crime and could end up in jail for 5 years. The BBC reported 41-year-old Joseph Shine, an Indian businessman living in Italy, challenged the law last year, calling it discriminatory. He said in his petition, married women are not a special case for the purpose of prosecution for adultery. They are not in any way situated differently than men. Basically, the law said the woman could not be held accountable because the man was the seducer. Well, no more. All 5 judges on the court said the law was archaic, arbitrary, and unconstitutional. The Chief Justice said, "Husband is not the master of wife. Women should be treated with equality along with men." For Global One, I'm Alicia Pacheco.
Fleeing for their lives, carrying their most precious possessions. Since last August, around 700,000 Rohingya Muslims have endured many miles and much misery to escape violence in Myanmar that the UN says could constitute genocide.
It's a human tragedy of enormous proportions. People came over to Bangladesh in a flood. In a very short period of time. It was one of the most rapidly rising situations of forced displacement that we've seen in decades.
Other hotspots have flared up in the past year. Fresh fighting in the Democratic Republic of the Congo forced tens of thousands of people a day to make the precarious crossing of Lake Albert into Uganda, a country already hosting over 1.4 million refugees. While the economic and constitutional crisis in Venezuela has pushed people to the country's borders, looking for better opportunities abroad.
So much more pressure could be put on the Maduro government to improve things, but it hasn't happened. Hopefully that will change. Hopefully we will see a more proactive effort in both the Human Rights Council and here in New York, but it remains to be seen if that's going to happen.
But new problems arise without old ones being solved, and tented cities in South Sudan, Lebanon, and Iraq continue to swell.
These conflicts are starting to mushroom and not being mitigated enough and not being solved. And so what we're seeing are global rise in forced displacement.
And while the UN is engaged in aid efforts in multiple countries, it's been criticised for not doing enough to engage repressive or complicit governments.
Where is the UN in all of these migrant crises around the world? It doesn't seem like the UN is really leading on these issues in these localities, nor is it really talking about this as a global issue.
And despite anti-migrant rhetoric from some Western nations, it's not these wealthier countries coming to the aid of the world's displaced. The UN estimates that 85% of migrants and refugees are hosted by poorer, developing countries. Just this month, the US reduced the number of refugees it will accept next year to 30,000, from 45,000 in 2018. While Hungary this year slashed its daily quota of asylum seeker admissions to just 2, down from 60 in 2016. But at this year's General Assembly, the migrant issue will be largely sidelined until the UN's Intergovernmental Conference in Marrakesh in December. Until then, the UN hopes the millions of migrants and refugees will be remembered as more than just statistics. Nick Harper, CGTN, New York.
ساعت 11:30 شب ما همین طیاره آمد در چاپا خبر نبودیم آمد همینجا 6 ماه همین تا یکیش خانم از 50 سالش است یکیش دختری حافظ قرآن بود که چند جز قرآن حفظ کرد سنش هم 13 سالش سر هستنی جدا کرد یکیش هم عروسم بود که دوم بود عروسیش خانه خودم هم خراب شد خانه بچه من
مرگ حکومت مالیه مرگ قماندان فرقه مرگ امریکایی تو قاتلین ما را ما ولایت قندوز مزبازاری ما را سر تا سری ولایت میکنیم یک ما جادا را بند میکنیم دفاتر ولایتی را سرش حمله میکنیم دیگه غرض نگیم مادر جان
وای قنن نصیبتان میکنم مادر وای مادر جان وای خوان جان وای خانه دولت خراب شد وای بچه بخوره خانه پدری مسافیدی مرا خراب
According to CNN, the State Department has announced that it has ordered all non-essential personnel leave the U.S. consulate in Basra, Iraq. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, has noted threats from Iran in a statement, and a senior U.S. official has stated in an interview that the decision to place the facility on ordered departure was fueled by security threats from Iran. According to the State Department, the U.S. Embassy Baghdad will continue to provide consular services to U.S. citizens in Basra.
And our Russian foreign minister says a mechanism to safeguard Iran's interests under the 2015 nuclear deal is developed in a way that it blocks any interference from a third country. Have a listen.
There was an initiative to form a special consultation mechanism that would discuss the ways to provide economic gain that Iran basically deserves with respect to the 2015 agreement, and how to make it so that third parties, so to speak, would not in any way interfere into these mechanisms that would be developed.
Sergei Lavrov said Moscow is working to make sure that Iran benefits from the nuclear agreement. Lavrov added that trade with Iran can be based on currencies other than the U.S. dollar. He stressed that companies that choose to leave Iran are making a big mistake. The mechanism is called a Special Payment System, or SPV. It allows oil companies and businesses to continue trading with Iran. Tehran has repeatedly said remaining signatories to the agreement have to offset the negative impact of the U.S. withdrawal if they wanted Tehran to remain in it.
After more than a decade of nuclear weapons and ballistic missile tests, the launch pads and detonation sites in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea have gone silent, for now. A bilateral charm offensive is underway, leading to 3 summits this year between the two Koreas, and promises of more to come.
The North has agreed to permanently close Tongchang engine testing site and its missile launch facility in the attendance of experts from relevant nations.
I promised President Moon Jae-in to visit Seoul in the near future.
Each side stands to gain. The North wants to open its economy to foreign investment and development. The South wants reunification and denuclearization.
The Koreas have made some real strides in confidence building, and they're talking about the elimination of a number of posts along the demilitarized zone. They've already established a liaison office at Kaesong, and the idea of communicating more effectively across that formerly fortified border is important.
Détente between the two Koreas made it possible for Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un to meet. And in Singapore this June, they did. Washington wants complete and verifiable denuclearization. As for Pyongyang,
they want the suspension or the reduction of sanctions. They want security guarantees from Washington. They want normalization of relations, and they really want to be seen as a genuine player in international relations. And the summit with Trump in June was a first step.
From the Singapore summit, a promising but vague agreement to denuclearize. Pyongyang returned the remains of American troops who fought in the Korean War but offered no timetable for destroying its nukes.
It's very difficult to discern from the North Korean government what their intentions are, if they're really honest in terms of denuclearization, or if they'll continue to use this thaw to their advantage in a positive way for both East and West, but also continue the weapons program on the side.
At this month's summit, some momentum, promises from the North to let inspectors in, and an offer to demolish its primary nuclear weapons complex. That in exchange for concessions from Washington.
Moscow and Beijing want sanctions on the DPRK eased to reward Pyongyang for opening talks and suspending missile tests. But the U.S. is insisting the sanctions remain in place as leverage. Washington has also accused Russia of cheating on sanctions and called China's provision of aid and commodities to the DPRK unhelpful. At the UN this week, with world leaders gathered in New York, the pressure is on. Li Lingtan, CGTN at the United Nations.
These beautiful triplet babies were almost a duo after their mom says a doctor asked if she wanted to abort one. After years of failed attempts with fertility treatments, Christy and Ryan feared they'd never be parents.
I've always, dreamed of having children and being a mom my whole life, and it's just something I've always wanted. And
the couple took out a loan to cover the cost of one last round of IVF.
It was, worth it to me to take that gamble because that's how badly I wanted children.
Weeks later, the couple learned they were pregnant with triplets. But a complicated pregnancy led doctors to ask Christy if she wanted to terminate one fetus to save the other two.
I was on bed rest since 20 weeks, so they literally didn't want me to even do laundry or do the dishes or anything. They just wanted me to lie there all day.
The couple believed they were given a third baby for a reason, so they took their chances. At 32 weeks, Christy delivered 3 healthy babies via C-section. Meet Rocky, Ellie, and Callie.
The babies were in the NICU for about 2 months, and they came home on Mother's Day of all days. I got to take them home, so I had the best first Mother's Day ever.
Big risks that delivered big rewards.